Mesachas Kesubos Daf Kuf Tes contains 3 Mishnayos, beginning with the first one, and the 3 Mishnayos are 3 of the halachas of which Admon had said that the Chachamim disagreed with. Admon had said 7. Here we're going to have 3 of them. The Gemara will discuss each of them independently. The Gemara will also, at the end of the first one, the Gemara will talk a bit about what the halacha is in these 7 cases of Admon and the 2 halachas of Chanan. So let's begin the first Mishnah. First Mishnah discusses a situation in which somebody agreed to give his son-in-law a certain amount of money as part of the marriage agreement. That is, his daughter got engaged or married to a man, and he had agreed to give a certain amount of money to the couple, and then he refused to give the actual money. The expression that's used by the Mishnah is Pashad es haregel. He extended his foot. That is an expression until today in modern Hebrew, which means that he went bankrupt. Here's a Machlokas Rishonim what it means exactly. If it means that he just waved his foot at him as if to say, get out of here, you could take the mud off my foot, I'm not giving you anything, not that he was bankrupt. Or the second shot, which is Rashi's preferred shot, which is that he said, you can hang me from a tree by my foot, here's my foot, I don't have any money, so there's nothing that I can give you. Either way, he promised a certain amount of money and he's not giving it. The question is, what should she do? She's kind of stuck in a marriage in which the marriage is not going to continue because her father is not paying the amount that he promised. So the Tanakam, which is the Chachamim, say she could just sit there until her hair turns white, meaning there's nothing she can do about it. She is stuck. Admon says she has a right to say, you don't have any tainas on me. I didn't promise you any money. It's my father you have tainas on, so you cannot keep me prisoner. So either accept this marriage without the money, and we'll continue, or set me free, and I'll go. But we can't stay in a situation like this with Kiddushin without a marriage. You don't have the right to force me into a situation like that. So that's a Mishnah. The Gemara quotes a Brisa, which is slightly different. According to the Brisa, in the case where the father promised the money, even the Chachamim agree to Admon that it's not her fault and he can't force her to stay in that situation. The Machlokas is in the case where she promised the money herself. She's the one who promised her husband a certain amount of money as part of their marriage, and she defaulted on the promise. There, the Chachamim say, well, now it's her responsibility. She can't blame her father, but Admon says she could still blame her father because she could say, I thought he was going to come up with the money. That's why I promised it to you. I didn't intend to pay it myself. Therefore, if my father's not coming up with the money, what do you want me to do about it? Set me free, or let's get married without the money itself. Okay, so this is the second version. Now, the Gemara on this brisa quotes one ha'ara here. The Gemara says that we have another brisa that says that this is only true if she is a Gedola, but if the girl is a Ketana, then we force him. Says the Gemara, what do you mean you force him? You force who? So Gemara's first option is to say you force the father, that the father has to give the money. So Gemara says that doesn't make sense. If the woman made the Tana as a Ketana, then that doesn't count as anything. The Ketana's promise is meaningless. Why should we force the father to fulfill the Ketana's promise? So if you force the father to fulfill the Ketana's, if you force the father to fulfill the promise anywhere, it should be for a Gedola, not for a Ketana. So the Gemara says no, therefore it means the husband, you force the husband to set her free, because if she's a Ketana, the promise doesn't really count, and there's no issue. Now, in both the Brisa and in the Mishnah, we had seen that Rabban Gamliel said, I agree with Admon. Also, in our last 2 halachos of Admon, Rabban Gamliel said, I agree with Admon. Now, we had that in the cases of Chanan, there were 2 people who agreed with Chanan. There was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai who agreed with Chanan against the other Chachamim. So now the Gemara discusses what is the halacha in all these situations. And the Gemara says, first of all, Rav Yitzchak ben Elazar Chizkiah, any place where Rabbi Gamliel agreed with Admon, the halacha is like him, like them, like Admon, and like Rabban Gamliel who agrees with him. So those are these first 3 cases of Admon. Now the Gemara quotes a brisa. The Gemara quotes Rav Nachman. The Gemara quotes Rava who asked Rav Nachman, is that true even in the case of the brisa, even in the case where the girl herself promised that she was going to bring money into the marriage and she did not? And he said, listen, I said it any place where Rabbi Gamliel agrees with Admon, not just in any Mishnah, and therefore, yes, even in this brisa, Rabbi Gamliel agreed with Admon, and the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel and like Admon. So now the Gemara quotes Rabbi Zera in the name of Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah, who said that the 2 halachas of Chanan, the halacha is like him and similar to him. The 7 halachos of Admon, the halacha is not like him and similar to him. Now, what is similar to him is Machokas Rishonim. Tosfos learns it means other cases that are similar halacha. Rashi learns it means the people who say like them. So, in the case of Hanan, the halacha is like Hanan and like those who agree with him. In the case of Admon, the halacha is not like him and those who agree with him. So the Gemara says, what does it mean, not like him and those who agree with him? The Gemara has a couple of options. The Gemara first wants to say that it means that the halacha is not like any of the cases of Admon and the people who agree with him. Because that cannot be, because we just said that the halacha is like Admon in the cases in which Rabban Gamliel agree with him. Says the Gemara, okay, so maybe it's the opposite. The halacha is always like Admon, but not like the people who agree with him. When he said the halacha is not like him and those who agree with him, we meant that the halacha is like Admon, but not like those who agree with him. Not so clear, according to Rashi's Pshat, how that there is a difference there if they say the same thing. According to Tosfos, it's not referring to other people, it's referring to other halachos. So the Gemara rejects this as well, because we said that the halacha is like Admon in the 3 cases in which Rabban Gamliel agree with him. So the Gemara therefore adjusted, and here's what he means to say is that the halacha is not like Admon in the cases where he's not agreed with, and the halacha is like Admon in those cases in which Rabban Gamliel does agree with him. All right, this concludes the Gemara's commentary on our first Mishnah. Now we get to our next Mishnah. Next Mishnah is another completely independent halacha. It talks about a case where somebody is complaining that a field is his. So he's had Reuven who goes to Shimon and says, "You're on my field. Now give me my field back." Shimon says, "I bought the field from Levi." So generally there are halachos to what happens in a case like that. Our case is where the sale from Levi to Shimon is documented, and Reuven is one of the signatories on that sale. He's one of the witnesses that signed the sale document. So the question is, the fact that Reuven himself, who's claiming that the land was his and was stolen from him by Levi, the fact that he went and signed the sale from Levi to Shimon, does that mean that he himself, by signing it, is admitting that it legally belonged to Levi? After all, why would he be a witness and sign the document from Levi to Shimon if he himself held that Levi stole from him and it was his? So that's Machakas between Amon and the Chachamim. The Chachamim say he lost his rights. He no longer can claim that the field was his because he already signed that it legally belonged to Levi. He signed the document in which Levi sold it to Shimon. Now, Admon disagrees. Admon says that he has a good claim. He can say, I signed the document because it was easier for me to take Shimon to court than to take Levi to court. Levi's a tough guy. I knew I was going to lose if I tried to take him to court, and that's why I was helping assist the sale from Levi to Shimon. But that doesn't mean that I agree that it belonged to Levi or now belongs to Shimon. I think it belongs to me the whole time. Now, that is the first case of the Mishnah. The second case of the Mishnah is similar, except this time, instead of Reuven signing on a sale document of the land that he was in question, of the land that he was claiming, he signed on a siman document of a neighboring field. And he signed that this was not, the field that he's claiming was not sold, the field next to it was sold, and the seller of that field used the field that's in question as a siman to identify the borders of the field. And he said there's the bordering field here. And in that bordering field, which is the field that Reuven's claiming, on that, Levi wrote in the siman document that that's mine. And Reuven signed on it as a signatory to the document defining the borders of the neighboring field, and he didn't point out that Levi is saying it's his. It's not really his. It's really mine. He signed on the document in which Levi wrote that this field is his, and now he's coming and saying, no, it's mine. So the question there is, the fact that he signed on a document which calls the field Levi's, does that mean that he admitted that it's not his and he loses his right? So the Gemara here says, the Mishnah here says, yes, here he definitely loses his right, and the implication is that even Admon agrees that he loses his right because there is no claim that the reason that I agreed to it is because I wanted to be able to take the buyer to court instead of the seller. Nothing, the field that he's arguing on didn't change hands, and therefore there's no such argument. Now the Gemara begins, and the Gemara limits the cases a bit. So first, Abai says this halacha that a witness who signs on the document loses his rights to claim that it was stolen from him, according to Chachamim. That's only a witness. However, if it's a judge who signed that the witnesses on the document were corroborated by his court, that is, a court will often corroborate a shtar. They will bring witnesses to testify that they signed on it, and then they'll write a document certifying that they certified the judges that they certified the witnesses that they really did sign. So a judge who's part of that court and signs on that document does not lose his rights, because he not necessarily did he ever read the document and see what it says in it to actually complain against it. A witness can't sign on a document without having read it. That's a halacha that Rav Chia says in a brisa. Therefore, if a witness signed on it, he must have read it, and if he signed on something that he will later claims is false and was stolen from him, he undermines his claim by signing on it. However, the judge who was present at the time that his court certified the witnesses on that shtar is not a problem, because he may never have read it. He does not have to read the document. He just has to corroborate the witnesses. Next, halacha Abai says, in the case where it was used as a siman, that is, it was used as defining the borders in the document which defined the borders, it named this land as belonging to someone else, and he signed on it. So Abai says that's only if it was being sold to someone else. That is, the land that was being sold and identified the border by this land that he's arguing over, that it was being sold to someone else. If, however, it was being sold to himself, and in the document which sells it to him, that is, the person who's arguing over the neighboring land, and in the document which sells it to him, he says it identifies the border as bordering another piece of land and says that piece of land belongs to the seller. That does not, the fact that he agrees and he signs on that does not mean that he loses his right to claim that that land is really his. Because it could be that the reason that he didn't make any claim on it is because he wanted the sale on the neighboring land to go through. He didn't want to do something which would jeopardize the sale, and therefore he was willing to sign on it even though he disagreed that the neighboring land belonged to the seller. The only way that he could have possibly done anything about it was to tell someone else that he's protesting and that he's signing on it because he doesn't want the sale to go through, but he's protesting and it doesn't really belong to the seller, it really belongs to him. Problem is people talk, and your friend is a friend, and your friend's friend has a friend of a friend, and the word would get back to the seller, and he would end up losing the sale in the first place. Now the Gemara brings a case which occurred involving these halachas, and where it says there was a man who made a similar claim on a field. That is, he signed a siman shtar. He signed a shtar which identified the bordering land using, and it named his field that he claimed was his belonged to someone else. He signed on that. Then he laid claim against and said it's really mine, which is exactly the case we've been discussing. We said that he loses in that case, but then the guy died, and the court appointed an apotropos to speak for his yisomim. It appointed a guardian or a lawyer to argue on behalf of his orphans, and the apotropos came to Abai and he said that this land here really belonged to the father of the home that I'm responsible for. So Abai said, okay, but he signed on a document which names it as being someone else's. So he said, therefore he loses, just as we see in this Mishnah here. So the apotropos said, had the man been alive, he would have said that actually there was only one furrow in my field that is neighboring the other field. That's what I gave over to the person who wrote that it's his field. And when he said that this field, that the field neighboring his field belongs to him, he's only talking about the last furrow. Because that's it, I gave him that last furrow. The rest of the field, it was mine. So I said, Abai, it's a good taina. Rabbi Yochanan said that somebody has a claim like that wins. So therefore, if you can prove that it once belonged to the person who died that you're representing, and he was able to prove that, then he has a good claim. The fact that he signed on it is not a problem because he only signed on the last row most closely neighboring the other field. So says the Gemara, then he won the case and he got the field. However, Abai said to him, give him the last row because he did agree that the last row belongs to him. So now the apotropos said, had he been alive, he would have said, I bought it back. I gave it over to be used as an identifying piece of land to the neighboring land. However, then I bought it back. And then the Gemara mentions that that row contained a row of trees. It was a row of trees that were morkav one on the other. So he says, I bought it back. So Abai says, again, you're saying good, because Rabbi Yochanan said that he's allowed to taina, that he bought it back afterwards, and then he wins that case as well. And Abai commented, this is a very good apotropos. All yisomim should be appointed an apotropos who knows how to say the correct claims, just like this person is able to do that. Now we get our next Mishnah. Discusses the third case of Admon. This is talking about somebody who had a field surrounded by other fields, and he had a path to his own field through those fields. And he went away overseas. When he came back, his path was gone and been swallowed up by the other fields, and he didn't remember where it was. So what's he supposed to do now? So the Chachamim say he has to purchase a path, and he has to pay whatever price they ask for. Otherwise, he'll just have to fly to his field. And since he can't, he's going to be able to be ripped off as to any amount of money that they choose to ask. And he needs to pay it. He has no other option. Admon says no, he can take the shortest possible route to his field because he's definitely owned a path. He owned a path somewhere, and therefore he has a right to get a path. So the minimum amount that he could possibly be, that piece of land he has a right to claim. So the Gemara says, let's start explaining this machlokes. What are the two opinions over here? What's going on? How does one opinion not agree with the other? So the Gemara says, if all the fields surrounding the land are all owned by one person, there's no machlokes there. Admon, what he's saying definitely makes sense. He could go to the owner of all the fields and say, you definitely owe me a path. Give me at least the minimum possible path that there is. If, however, it belongs to a bunch of different people, let's say it belongs to 4 different people, so then there's no machlokes. Either the chachamim are definitely right. He can't claim anything to anybody. Each one will say, your path wasn't by me. Go to somebody else. You can't prove your path was through my field. I don't have to give you anything. And therefore, he can't get anything unless he's willing to pay for it. Now, if the fields were sold, so if it was owned by 4 different people, and then they each sold their fields to separate people, same thing. They could each push them off. If the fields were owned by one person, and then he sold it to 4 different people, again, the 4 people could all push him off and say, your field is not in the piece of land that I bought. The case of the machlokes, says the Gemara, is where all 4 fields were owned by 4 different people, and then one person bought them all. So the chachamim and Admon argue, what's the taina over here? Admon says he could go to him and say, listen, you definitely own my path. You bought all 4 fields. The chachamim say that he could taina, listen, if you want, I'll give you a price, pay my price. If you don't pay my price, I'm just going to cancel the sale. I'll give it back to all 4 people, and you'll have to pay super C price because you won't be able to have any claim against anybody. Therefore, pay the amount that I'm willing to sell it to you for. Otherwise, you're going to end up getting ripped off much worse. All right, now the Gemara brings 2 similar cases, which the Gemara wants to compare to this Mishnah. The first is where somebody was dying and he was discussing the inheritance that he was leaving over for his sons with his sons, and he told them, give a tree to the daughter. There's one tree. I want a tree to be given to the daughter. The sons inherit everything else. Now, he didn't specify which tree, and the sons went and divided up the land, and they didn't give any tree to the daughter at all. So Rav Yosef wanted to say, this is just like the case of the Mishnah. The daughter doesn't really have a recourse, because she could go to each one of them and say, why should I give you a tree from my land? Maybe you should take a tree from someone else. Just like in our case, if there are 4 people around, they each could say, who says your path was by me? You can go to one of the other 3 guys. So the Gemara says it's not correct, because over here, all the sons were obligated to give her a tree. None of them can claim your tree's not by me. They were all supposed to give her a tree. They all failed to give her the tree. They're all responsible to make sure that she has the tree. So what they have to do is redivide it. They have to put all the land back together in one estate, give her the tree, and then divide what's left. Because they all bear that responsibility. They can't push her off on someone else because they all bear equal obligation. Now the next case, somewhat similar, is where the guy said to give her a tree, and then he died, and he owned a number of trees. He also owned 2 half trees. That is, he had a partnership with someone over a tree, so he owned half the tree, and then there was another tree that he had a partnership with someone and he owned half of that tree. So the Yisomim, the boys, wanted to give those 2 half trees to the daughter. They said, listen, 2 halves together equals a whole. We were promised to give her a tree, didn't specify which one, so we're going to give her these 2 half trees, and that adds up. Now that's much more tircha to be able to harvest them, to harvest half a tree, split it with the person that they have a partnership with. That's why they wanted to get rid of these 2 half trees, and that's why she doesn't want to have trees. The question is, do they have a right to do that? So the Gemara says that Rav Mordechai said to Rav Ashi, name of Avimi from Hagrunya, name of Rava, it is possible to call 2 half trees a tree. And therefore they are technically fulfilling, it may not have been what the father meant, but they are technically fulfilling his instructions by giving her the 2 half trees.